Welcome to the League of Women Voters First Friday. And we are very lucky this morning to be able to welcome to our event the citizen petitioners who have taken the time to imagine a warrant issue that the town does not have on its and has not initiated themselves or itself. And this is an opportunity for us to hear from them. The timing protocol will be quite tight, and that each presenter has between 12 to at maximum 15 minutes to be able to present their slides or present their particular concern. And then we have, as citizens, an opportunity to make comments or to ask questions. If you are making comments or asking questions, and we certainly invite that, please be as succinct as possible so that we don't put pressure on the very last people and therefore find ourselves in a time crunch. I want to remind you, my name is Diane Proctor, and I'm the chair of the Town Government Committee, and I sit on the board of the League of Women Voters. This event is being recorded on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Concord and Carlisle, which is the producer and owner of its content. When aired, posted, or otherwise distributed, this recording will be available in its entirety, with the exception that excerpts may be provided by the League of Women Voters of Concord Carlisle to news media reporting on this event. No part of this recording may be used in political campaign advertising. Please, if you wish, though, send people who have questions about your particular petition to the League website under First Fridays, and there you'll find nicely in order all of the League First Fridays and the videos that accompany them. So welcome. We're going to begin this morning with Melissa Sawfield. Melissa is the chair of the Historic Commission, and she's presenting the Scenic Roads General Bylaw. There are two ways to ask questions or comment to Melissa. One is to raise your hand under reactions. You know that little funny little smiley face at the bottom of your screen where you can, I'm going to do it right now so you can see, raise your hand. And then be sure to lower it after you ask your question or comment. And I will be watching for those. If you instead wish to put your question in the chat box, Carlin Reed, who's with us, will be covering the chat box and can ask your questions for you. So thank you, Melissa, and welcome.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Just want to make sure I did this right. Can you hear me?
We're in good shape.
Yeah, okay. So I just, first of all, I want to say that it does say March 8th. This is the public hearing that I'm presenting next Tuesday. But I do know that this is the League event, and I'm very grateful to you for allowing us to present this. So the Scenic Roads Bylaw is being co-sponsored by the Concord Historical Commission and the Planning Board. You can turn to the next slide. Thank you. The Scenic Road Bylaw derives from state legislation that was first passed in 1973 to provide communities the means to protect their scenic roads. Since then, at least 113 towns, including all of Concord's neighbors, except Maynard, have adopted a Scenic Roads Bylaw. The bylaw states that either the Historical Commission, Planning Board, or Natural Resources Commission may recommend creation of the bylaw to be approved at town meeting. The bylaw also requires the listing of roads that we are proposing for designation, and it establishes a schedule of fines if the bylaw is violated. Next slide, please. Under section 40, chapter 15C, any repair, maintenance, reconstruction, or paving work on a designated scenic road that might require destruction or removal of a stone wall or cutting or removal of a tree in the public road right-of-way must undergo a public hearing conducted by the planning board. If a tree is involved, the hearing would be combined with the current processes. The tree warden and planning board would jointly review the request. Next slide. There's a long history in Concord calling for greater protection of our roads, with many proposals either calling for passage of a Scenic Roads Bylaw or greater protection of all roads. These include the 1987 Land Use Plan, the 1995 and 2003 Historic Resources Master Plan, which I'm just holding up this text that was produced by the Historical Commission. Next slide, please. There's also the 2005 comprehensive long-range plan that sought to protect scenic vistas, and it called on the town to protect all Concord roads with a universally historic and environmentally sensitive policy. And moving on to the next slide, And this leads us up to our most recent long-range plan, Envision Concord, the bridge to 2030. This plan listed several action items. Among these are to review the effectiveness of regulatory tools to better protect and preserve the town's historic character. The promotion of this bylaw is a direct response to that recommendation. Additionally, Envision Concord called for review and implementation of the 2007 Freedom's Way report that the priority heritage landscape recommendations. This encouraged the review of the 1994 roads policy, which outlined defining features of historic landscapes. Next slide. Working with several Concord historians and researchers, we have built on these past efforts and developed criteria to determine what might constitute a scenic road. And we are proposing 9 to be designated at town meeting. But first, I'd like to talk about the criteria. There are 4 that we've established. One, that the road appears on the 1852 HF Walling. This is a town authorized map of Concord. The road exists overall scenic beauty and ample evidence of stone walls and canopy trees. There is clear proof of the road's age and historical significance of the trees and stone walls. And finally, the road includes features such as historic layout, historic sites, houses, and monuments on its path. On the slide here, you see the 9 roads that we are proposing: Bald's Hill, Barrett's Mill, Garfield, Liberty, Monument, Old Road to 9 Acre Corner, Strawberry Hill, Sudbury Road, Westford Road. There is extensive research on these roads and the documents I have been referring to on the Historical Commission's webpage. This research will continue to be refined and updated up until town meeting. Also on that webpage, we have a frequently asked questions, the bylaw itself, and other research that has been done about scenic roads. Next slide, please. There are some very important caveats, however, to the proposed bylaw. First and foremost, the bylaw does not affect private property. It is only triggered when a property owner proposes a repair or reconstruction within the public right-of-way. That might lead to the destruction or removal of a stone wall or cutting or removal of a tree. The public right-of-way includes the paved and unpaved portions of the town's right-of-way. This public right-of-way for most roads could extend a few feet or several feet beyond the edge of the pavement. This is town land and subject to town control. Land beyond the public right-of-way is private and not subject to the bylaw. It is also important to note that language of the bylaw explicitly states that it does not apply to cutting or removal of trees by the town in connection with right-of-way maintenance, or to mitigate, eliminate, or avoid hazardous conditions as determined by the tree warden. Annual roadside maintenance by the Public Works and line clearing by CMLP would also be exempt. Next slide, please. Here we go. The rules and regulations that would govern the implementation of the Scenic Roads bylaw will be developed after town meeting. Several criteria will guide their development. And first of all, overarching is the issue of public safety. Then environmental values, historic values, preservation of natural resources, scenic and aesthetic characteristics, existence or absence of reasonable alternatives, and consistency with articulated town policies such as the Envision Concord Long Range Plan. Next slide, please. Between now and town meeting, town staff, that's principally the town planner and our senior planner, will collect sample rules and regulations already developed by communities across the Commonwealth. They will meet with town departments, residents, and other stakeholders to determine which best apply to Concord's specific character. Next slide, please. If the article passes, which obviously we hope it will, the town clerk will certify the vote, and she submits this to the Attorney General for final approval. This process can take 3 to 6 months. And during this time, staff will refine the rules and regulations that will govern the bylaw. These will be reviewed by the Public Works Commission, Historical Commission, the Planning Board, and other stakeholders. Ultimately, the Planning Board will hold a public hearing to adopt the rules and regulations. This has been a pretty dry presentation of the proposed warrant article, but I'd like to say a little bit more about why. As anyone who lives in Concord can see, the town's undergoing considerable physical change. Ours is a very desirable community. Land and house values are climbing. There's enormous pressure to utilize all buildable lots and maximize those by building large, expensive homes that can turn a profit for developers. With so much of our land in conservation, which is a good thing, but it does mean that the cost of available developable land is high and only going to go higher. We are a nationally, many would say internationally important historic town, and we have responsibility for caring for that history, not to preserve it in aspect because change is inevitable, but to balance growth and change with active respect for the past. The envisioned Concord Long Range Plan noted that while people value the history and historic resources of Concord, they do so passively. I believe if we remain passive, we may lose what we treasure, which is why we encourage the passage of this Scenic Roads bylaw as a reminder to all of us of what we still have that we can still preserve. So that's the end of my presentation, and I'm ready for questions.
Thank you, Melissa, so much. For those of you who may have joined us a little bit late, there are two ways to ask questions. One is to put a question in the chat box, and Carlin Reed will be managing that. The other is to raise your hand. The icon on the bottom right of your computer will allow you to do this. That's what a raised hand is like. And then if you will lower your hand afterwards, it would be much appreciated. So do I see any questions? Oh, good morning, Andrea. Andrea Solomon, why don't you start us off?
Hi, I'm Andrea Solomon. I live at 75 Ash Street, and I am also on the Public Works Commission. And I just wanted to provide a little bit more background to the ways that the Scenic Roads bylaw has been discussed over the years. When Public Works Commission started looking into this, we did realize it's been brought up a few times in the past. So in 1994, there was a Selectmen's Road Management Advisory Committee that investigated the needs for a Scenic Roads bylaw. They determined that Concord needed a much broader vision than what the Scenic Roads bylaw was recommending. So in order to broaden the vision of the Scenic Roads bylaw, they wanted to open it up for more discussion and more thorough investigation. So they decided that instead of picking a few roads in Concord to make scenic roads, they wanted to maintain the aspects of all the roads in Concord that would allow them to honor the existing environment, which enhance the historic, scenic, and agricultural properties of every roadway in Concord, and also keep that consistent with public safety. So they implemented a policy, a roads policy, that I think really took effect in 1999. And that applies what they want, what is being proposed for Scenic Roads bylaw is actually existing right now in Concord for every road in Concord. It's not choosing a few, it's treating all of the roads as important and deserving of the same consideration that the Scenic Roads bylaw would just be considering for a few roads. In 2006, it was brought up again. It was actually brought up in some people wanted to adopt the Scenic Roads bylaw just for Virginia Road. That was the only road on the list, which isn't even on the list this time. And again, in response to that, the Public Works saw the drawback as the Scenic Roads bylaw being too selective and lacking in flexibility, which is often the case with bylaws. They often kind of have a one-size-fits-all quality to them. Also at that time, they were developing the public shade tree policy, which takes into consideration, again, every tree in Concord in a public right-of-way is considered very carefully before removing or trimming. Like they do everything they can to say that. So
Andrea, I don't want to cut you off. We're very tight timing.
Okay. I just wanted to make that the Scenic Roads bylaw is actually more limiting than the policy that we have right now. Our roads policy has flexibility. It lets us design footprint road improvements that protect the character and special assets of all the roads in Concord. So every road is considered important, and we don't want to change anything that we don't have to.
Thank you so much. Very much appreciate that. Are there other questions? Melissa, do you have any comment that you'd like to offer?
I just said I don't think this is inconsistent with that. I appreciate what all she has said, and I have I have not actually seen the written policy, so that would be something that would be of value, because I'm relying a lot on the researchers that have been conducted on the roads that we've identified. What we're asking, that this is a more public process, and it's also trying to bring attention to the historic properties of Concord. It is as much about public relations, about a reminder to the community that we do have special roads. I don't disagree. I appreciate the fact that Public Works has been so careful about preserving the roads that we do have in Concord. We are talking, though, about the future, where we may not have frankly, as effective and attentive leadership as we do now in planning and Public Works. We acknowledge we have excellent people in Public Works. This is just a bylaw that, yes, Andrea says has got some limitations, but it does focus very much so on some of the more important historic roads. It's not inconsistent.
Thank you. And I see, Dean, you have a question?
Yeah, very briefly, cutting against something like this is the policy that the town is trying to engage in called Complete Streets, which will engage with road design and development such that it's safe to walk, to ride a bicycle, and also to go in a motor vehicle. So many of our scenic roads are not safe. Monument Street is a classic. You have parking along Punkatasset, people open a door, there might be a bike coming. So it's just, these are not safe. So these two things just cut against each other in some way. And we've had an example of this over in West Concord. A few years ago, we wanted to repave 62 going out of West Concord. The state was willing to give us money, but if they gave us the money, it had to be X width. And the town said, no, we don't want your money because we don't want to widen this at all. So these constraints and these conflicts are going to continue. And this just puts another barrier towards and puts itself in the way of those and creates some of those conflicts, I feel. That's just my point. Thanks.
Thank you. Oh, go ahead.
Can I just answer? I mean, I'm grateful for your bringing that up, because I don't think one size fits all, which is clear what the Public Works said when they had this offer to change 62 and the money, that we do have a unique town here. And the concept behind this is to help preserve the historic properties of the town. Complete Streets would be very different. This provides for a public process to review what it is the community wants for its streets and a very particular street. So thank you.
I think there's one question in the chat box, Carlin.
Sure. The first one was one that I put in was what does the Department of Public Works think? Because I know they've talked about it extensively and debated extensively at their last meeting. I think I see Andrea has her hand up. She may have another aspect that she wants to supplement. But there is another question here. Before that, Joe Stein asks, why was Lowell Road excluded from the list? He thinks it's one of the most beautiful roads in town and should be protected.
I don't actually have a great answer for that. It was, I think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, if a road actually goes, it has a numbered highway or a numbered street, state within the street, which I'm not sure that Lowell Road does or not, it cannot be considered. I think there is also concern that we had identified 9 that seemed reasonable that we could do the additional research on. But this is something we could take up, before town meeting. I could refer back to our community, our committee that has done research. I used to live on Lowell Road. I'm very well aware how beautiful it is, and a lot of historic properties along it.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll ask.
Andrea, do you have something you need to add because your hand's back up, or is it just?
I do. Yes. I just wanted to add that the scenic bylaws, the scenic roads bylaw does not protect private property. It doesn't have anything to do with what is on private property. So when you talk about historic properties, those are protected under other laws. The scenic roads bylaw has nothing to do with the private property. And the Public Works has discussed this, not as much as we like to, because we found out about it a little late, but it does seem like this is a redundancy that actually restricts what we already have, which is a very comprehensive plan to treat every road, every tree in the public right of way as important with a lot of consideration to public safety, and also coming up against some of the issues that Dean Banfield also mentioned, which is public safety, multi-use of roads. That all has to be integrated within an overarching philosophy that Concord has adopted since 1999.
Thank you so much. This has been such an informing and thoughtful discussion. If this becomes typical of what we do, we're going to be here until 5 o'clock tonight. But I'm so grateful for the participation. Melissa, do you have a last word?
I just would say it's not inconsistent. All this does is provide a public process. It would not be inconsistent. It wouldn't constrain. Public Works would just have a meeting. I mean, the tree warden is in Public Works. So it's not.
I would just add that you are adding on public meetings that have to be scheduled that do interfere with the planning of road work and the implementing of road work. I'm not saying it's inconsistent. I'm saying it's redundant. It is a redundancy that may be unnecessary, that may prolong or prohibit certain work that we need to get done in a very timely manner that is already part of a very public process.
Thank you both so much. Clearly, there's a lot to discuss in this bylaw, and thank you so much. We're now going on to the second item, and once again, let's try to restrict our comments or our questions in a very brief way, so that we won't be crowding the end of the program. Beverly Bryant is here. And she is presenting for us the 5-year moratorium on synthetic turf, an issue that has long been discussed in this town. Welcome, Beverly, and thank you.
Thank you. So the article is to see if the town will adopt a moratorium on the construction or installation of any synthetic turf defined as monofilament carpet with loose infill on any land of any size owned by the town for a 5-year time period starting on May the 1st, 2022 and ending on May the 1st, 2027, or to take any other action relative thereto. This moratorium is a 5-year extension of the 3-year moratorium that was first put in place at the 2016 town meeting and then extended for another 3 years in 2019. It will apply to all town land in Concord, including the Concord Public Schools. It does not apply to private land, nor the Concord Carlisle Regional High School, which includes the Douglas White Fields and the Stadium Field, because these fields are under joint jurisdiction with Carlisle. Oh, sorry, I'm forgetting to move it on. That was 2. Apologies. So this is now 3. Thank you. Synthetic turf is made from a plastic monofilament carpet with an infill made from discarded tires that are ground up into pellets called crumb rubber. New infills have been developed that include small plastic beads, treated wooden pellets called Brock fill, and other plant-based fills to replace the crumb rubber. Slide 4. Crumb rubber contains known carcinogens such as benzopyrene, which is banned in Europe, and endocrine disruptors like phthalates that block the function of the male hormone androgen. These developmental hormones are particularly dangerous in the low doses that occur in these fields. Children are more susceptible to these toxic chemicals than adults and absorb them while playing, either by mouth, through skin, or through off-gassing of the fields on hot days. Slide 5. In 2016, 3 government agencies together launched the Federal Research Action Plan to study crumb rubber and its effects on human health. This study is ongoing and has not yet been able to form any conclusions about health risks. Since our moratorium was initiated, more chemicals of concern have been identified in synthetic turf. There have been no properly conducted case control studies on the risks of synthetic turf to children. Slide 6. Synthetic turf has a significant environmental impact. During heavy rains and snows, the chemicals and infill, whether crumb rubber, plastic beads or other fills are washed out of the fields and ultimately end up polluting our woodlands, waterways, and wells. They enter the food chain and put wildlife and humans at risk. This can be seen in both the Douglas White fields and, as you see here, in the stadium field. Slide 7. The plastic grass blades in artificial turf are made with the aid of polyfluoroalkyl substances known as PFAS as extrusion agents. Plastics used in synthetic turf have been found to contain PFAS chemicals, which have also been detected in Brock fill, the fill made from wooden pellets. PFAS do not degrade over time, but accumulate in the environment indefinitely. PFAS create serious health risks, for example, birth defects, cancer, and immune suppression, among others. Slide 8. Tests to measure PFAS chemicals are only available for a few out of the thousands that exist. Massachusetts regulates measurable PFAS in drinking water to a limit of 20 nanograms per liter. In 2021, the Hugh Cargill well already had over half the legal limit. The Douglas White fields are in the Hugh Cargill well catchment area. The addition of more synthetic turf threatens to further contaminate our water supply and potentially require expensive water treatments. Slide 9. The plastic grass blades break off at a rate of 0.3 millimeters per year, resulting in microplastics being constantly washed from the fields. The new plastic bead infills could also pollute Concord's waterways. Slide 10. The construction of synthetic turf fields works against the sustainability principles adopted by the town in 2011 by replacing an organic ecosystem with toxic chemicals that accumulate in the environment and pollute the soil and water, by making these fields net emitters of carbon rather than capturing carbon by photosynthesis, by destroying the biodiversity that grass fields support, and by adding to the toxic waste in landfills when they are disposed of. The climate emergency requires urgent action, and there is no doubt that these fields contribute to the problem. Slide 11. Improvements in grass varieties have led to grasses that can stand up to hard use and drought conditions. They can be managed organically without pesticides or herbicides. A University of Missouri study showed that over a 16-year period, organically managed grass fields were far less expensive than conventional fields or synthetic turf. Some clubs are replacing their synthetic turf fields with natural grass because of increased leg and foot injuries. Slide 12. Synthetic turf fields have to be replaced every 10 to 13 years and are not currently recyclable. They have to be disposed of in a landfill, usually out of state. Disposal costs are now estimated at $350,000 per field. This is an unnecessary cost to the town when there are readily available, cost-effective alternatives to synthetic turf in the form of organically managed grass. Slide 13. In conclusion, we are asking the town to continue the current moratorium on synthetic turf for another 5 years, to protect our children from exposure to untested and toxic chemicals, to allow the ongoing research on the safety of synthetic turf to be completed, to protect our town from the toxic chemicals washing out of these fields, slide 14, to maintain our grass fields as a valuable ecosystem that captures carbon, and to protect the town from the increasing costs of disposal and replacement of these fields. And slide 15 is the article again, and I ask for your support on Article 16. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Beverly. That's both a comprehensive presentation and a thoughtful one. Do we have questions or comments for Beverly? Please indicate by raising your hand or by Okay, Eleanor, I happen to be able to see you, but by and large, I wouldn't unless you do the raise your hand or put a comment in the chat box, but please go ahead, Eleanor Carr, and then Pamela Dritt.
Eleanor, you are still muted.
See, I can't see her at all. How did you find her? Okay.
Thank you, Beverly, for the presentation. It's very clear. And I mean, I was appalled when I learned that Concord was using artificial turf. I think it is just outrageous. And it's not just that it affects one generation, it goes on. It you know, I think it continues, and it's horrifying. It shows no regard for safety. Children fall on that, they pick it up in their skin. Kids put their fingers in their mouths all the time. We know that. But there is, you know, the expense of disposing of it as well, $350,000. That's a lot of money that the town can use. And it's true, it costs money to maintain grass. We know we had to put in a new lawn last summer, but we didn't consider putting in artificial turf. It should be state law and possibly national law, but you know, that's something that needs to come.
I thank you so much. Pamela Dritt.
Thank you for that excellent presentation. I too think this is a no-brainer. Anyone who sat on the artificial turf at town meeting knows how miserably hot that was compared to regular grass, which is cooling. And to trade a dead, poisonous mat for living, carbon producing green ecology is so absurd. It's both. Thank you. I think we should ban it forever. And my question is, can we replace those fields with grass of the new varieties that are cheaper to maintain?
Probably the DPW people would answer that better than I, but it could be taken out, yes, and replaced. It would be expensive, but that would be my my choice. But I know that there's a lot going into that. Alan, did you want to say something to that?
Sure, just introduce myself, Alan Cathcart, Director, Concord Public Works. Obviously interested in the topic, given we have responsibilities for maintaining some infrastructure, which includes the artificial turf. At this point, there is a plan for replacement, but that's all. And there has been no assessment of alternatives at this point. We just haven't even begun. It's a plan for FY24. We're still wrapping up 22 and planning on 23 right now, but it is on our radar, and I'm sort of listening attentively and trying to understand the pros and cons, and you know, helpful to hear the information that Ms. Bryant sort of provided. So,
can we make sure that you actually consider the new turf and low maintenance turf replacement for this without?
Yes, yeah, I think the issue is it's not really me or Public Works, it's the town. This is your part of the town, and it's obviously your community, your interests. We just try to bring information forward and, you know, address what the needs are, and you know, it'll be part of the conversation. I can assure you that.
Thank you, Alan, so much.
It's too late to put that into your warrant article that the town must consider replacement of existing fields with the new kinds of turf, isn't it?
It is too late to amend it in that regard, because that would be a substantial emendation, and that's not possible right now. But we're on our way, I think. Carlin, there's some questions in the chat box. Could you?
Right. There are two of them. One from Nancy. She wants to know if there are any citations, Beverly, to your work regarding the studies. And the other question is from Marge, how can we change the high school CCHS fields? So citations and CCHS are the questions.
For these studies, the Federal Research Action Plan had the part 1 has been published. You can find that online. At least I think you can find it online. I certainly have a copy. The part 2 has not yet been published. Part 1 really covers the toxicity of the chemicals that are in the artificial turf, particularly the crumb rubber they're looking at. They don't do the PFAS. The part 2 will be exposure. If risk is toxicity times exposure, then we only have half the picture. The exposure is the other half. So that has not been done. The Brock fill, I could not nail that down. That came through the ether from our turf field group. So I would have to look harder for that. But I believe it has been found to have PFAS chemicals.
If you could put in the chat box, whatever connection or HTTP you used to find what you found, that would be helpful for people. They can find that in the chat box. If you can't, this is just a general reminder that whatever questions this program evokes in the participants and in the citizens, please don't hesitate to reach out to the people who are presenting this. The town meeting is not until May 1st. So we have some time to investigate and explore each of these presentations.
What about the second question about changing out the CCHS fields?
Right.
Well, I'm interested in that, if Alan is still with us, to know what it is that they're planning to replace them with. We have tried to become part of that conversation, haven't quite managed to catch that, I think. So do you have a sense, Alan, of what the Douglas White fields will be replaced with in terms of the fill? We're obviously looking at a plastic carpet again. Is that going to be declared PFAS free, or what is the story?
Okay, well, the issue as far as what and how the fields will be replaced hasn't even begun. There has, other than sort of a budget plan. I think the users of the field, the recreation department, the schools, the various stakeholders in the community who have interests will probably have a voice as well. Mm-hmm. Again, I try to assure people we respond to the community's needs and interests. We don't dictate them, especially with public works, we're more implementation. So I think there's going to be a conversation. Obviously I'm here so I can hear one end of, one side of the conversation. I'm going to hear other sides of the conversation, and hopefully the town will be given facts and information that are helpful and then make a decision. Generally, it's cost and benefit, and that's what people consider. I will say, just to take a moment, when we talk about polyfluorinated alkaline substances, PFAS, it's a relatively new environmental risk and toxicity issue that the world is dealing with. Massachusetts is taking a lead on the drinking water side, but it just caution everybody, it is ubiquitous. These chemicals, they are still used in the industry and products that everybody has in their house and in their personal care products and everywhere else. And when we talk about parts per trillion, it's such a small level that everything we do, we can look and point in every direction and find it. So as far as the source and managing societally, we got to deal with it, but ultimately just kind of put it out there on your radar that we all have personal responsibilities. We have septic systems in town. When you're treating your Gore-Tex or waxing your cross-country skis or flossing your teeth, you're coming across PFAS. So it's just sort of a public information announcement while I have the opportunity.
Alan, that's so helpful. I'll have to tell my dentist I'm not going to floss my teeth any longer. That is good.
Could I just make one comment to that? I know we are short of time. Whatever PFAS chemicals there are in the environment, we have created them and put them there. They are not naturally occurring. So there is no background level of PFAS. There is only PFAS that we have created and put into the environment, it does not break down, it does not go away. So the more we add, the more toxic it gets, essentially. I think you'd probably agree with that, Alan.
It is startling, isn't it? Janet Rothrock, last comment, please.
Yeah, real quick point. Many communities in Massachusetts are asking to join the Massachusetts Water Resource Authority water supply system, which is fed by the Quabbin Reservoir, because of PFAS issues. So this is an issue that's at the beginning of it of being understood and researched. As Bev mentioned, they only test for, I think, 6 or 8 of the thousands that exist of PFAS chemicals. So it's something to keep an eye on, but it's a burgeoning problem and potentially an awful problem for drinking water supplies. Thank you.
And an expensive one to remedy, as our neighbors have found out. Beverly, thank you so much for your presentation. It's much appreciated, as is the commentary from everyone. Our next presenter, we're going a little bit out of order. For those who are on first, you'll know this. Good morning, Joe. Joe Stein is going to present. This is article number 37, to impose a checkout bag charge when one goes to a grocery store, or I suspect to any store. So thank you, Joe. And this is, again, article 37.
Thank you, Diane. So my name is Joe Stein. I live at 21 Thoreau Street. And as Diane mentioned, this is Article 37, to authorize the select board to petition to impose a checkout bag charge. So the specific article would authorize the select board to petition the legislature for a law requiring that retail establishments in Concord charge a minimum of 10 cents for each new checkout bag distributed, and any money collected for the bags would be retained by the retailer. This is really just asking for the first step. This is not requiring a charge yet. Towns are not able to impose charges on their own, so they have to actually, so that's why we have to go to the state to petition them to create a law. So the purpose of this article, there are four real purposes. One is to really just incentivize consumers to reuse checkout bags. And this is the most environmentally sustainable and economic option. The second is to give consumers the choice to not to pay for unwanted or unneeded bags. 3, it allows the money collected to be retained by the retailer to help defray costs. And 4, it reduces waste and disposal and recycling costs that are borne by the town and ultimately by its residents through tax. I think it's worth mentioning that this is not a tax, so any money collected would remain with the retailer. And it's transparent such that any explicit charges would be on the receipts. And as I mentioned, this special law must be passed by the Massachusetts legislature and signed by the governor to go into effect. Now, this is not anything new. So, our neighbors, for example, Lincoln and Sudbury, recently passed this exact warrant language in the 2021 town meetings. And so we're really just trying to build on their success. Won't spend too much time here, but obviously we have a trash problem in our country. The average American produces about 5 pounds of trash every day. Much of the plastic waste ends up in our aquatic ecosystems, as you know. So this is really just a small step in reducing the trash in Concord and reducing costs associated with disposal and recycling. It's good for the environment. Studies show that a small required charge is really the best tool to encourage bag reuse. There was a study done in Los Angeles County recently where a 10-cent bag charge plus a plastic bag ban, which they had initially in place, resulted in a tremendous uptick in reusable bag use, 5% to 45%. And interestingly, the amount of times that bags were not used at all increased substantially as well. Studies also show that when consumers receive a free checkout bag, they generally treat them as disposable. And as I mentioned, reusing bags is really the best option, as environmental costs are spread across multiple uses. And so just have a few pictures here. So paper, in terms of the number of uses needed to beat single-use plastic bags on greenhouse gas emissions, paper is about 3 uses, polypropylene bags about 10 to 11, cotton 130 or so. Reusable bags need more uses, but they last significantly longer. I have cotton bags that I've purchased probably 10 years now, and they're still in pretty good shape. I think, so one thing to note is that ban-only policies can have unintended consequences. So Concord currently has a plastic bag reduction bylaw in place from 2015 that's reasonably successful. The challenge is that it shifts people to using and disposing paper bags. So they're better on degradability, obviously, but they're significantly worse on net greenhouse gas, water use, chemical emissions, and obviously deforestation. And they also risk being environmentally counterproductive. We've seen many instances in town where retailers can simply exempt themselves by increasing bag thickness to make them quote unquote reusable. And this kind of violates, in my view, the bylaw intent. And so a checkout bag charge coupled with our existing ban on single-use plastic checkout bags has been shown to be the most effective policy. It's good for residents. So we're already paying for bags. I think a transparent, easily avoidable charge allows shoppers to choose to save money by reusing bags. And so it will cost actually much less for shoppers, 10 cents for a disposable bag for each use versus, these assumptions are somewhat conservative, maybe less than 2 cents a use if you have a polypropylene reusable bag. And we already talked about the reduced demand for checkout bags, which would reduce waste and disposal and recycling costs. It's also good for retailers. So it would, these checkout bags are not free for them. They have to pay for them, and this will help defray their costs. It levels the playing field across all retailers and helps stores switch to the most sustainable options. And then third, and importantly, the State Food Association recently testified in support of a statewide bag charge 2 years ago in their legislative session. This works. This is common practice now in Boston, Haverhill, Newton, Cambridge, Framingham. As far as I understand it, the 2 Massachusetts towns are Sudbury and Lincoln. California, it's statewide, Maine, Vermont. And it's also very prominent in Europe as well. Denmark has had a bag charge now for quite a number of years. And finally, it's a win-win-win. It's a win for the environment. It's a win for Concord residents. It's a win for Concord businesses. I really appreciate your support and value any kind of critical feedback you have on this. And look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe, so much. That was, I think you're running your own slides, right? So if you stop sharing, then we can get you back on the screen.
Let's see, pause share. There we go.
There you go. Thank you.
Okay.
Perfect. So let me start by saying thank you. That was both efficient and thoughtful presentation. Do we have questions or comments?
Diane, we do have one from the chat here.
And yes, that's what I was going to say. Carlin, go ahead.
Okay, Stefan has asked, did the other Massachusetts cities and towns also go via the home rule petition route to implement their charges?
My understanding is that, and I'm not an expert, but cities can impose these charges on their own. But I think there's a limitation on whether towns can do so. So they have to actually petition the state legislature to get the special law in place. So that process was done by Lincoln and Sudbury last year. I was told that this is relatively non-confrontational within the state legislature. I think that's a relative term, but it has been moving very quickly, and it may even be enacted now. I actually need to double check that, but that's my understanding.
Because
that
our
helps.
home rule petitions have not gone through very quickly.
Right.
Point. So if you could check on that, it would be really helpful before town meeting, so that people can know what the kind of timeline on such a proposal might be. Are there other comments or questions that anyone has? Carlin, do you see anything else in the chat box?
No, I don't, but I wondered if Stefan had a follow-up to his question because he's got his microphone turned on.
Thank you. I just briefly wondered what the situation with a statewide move could be. I know we've discovered this in other areas, like the property tax surcharge or
Right.
transaction. And at some point, if the state stalls on an individual town's home rule petition, when they get about 30 or 40 or 50 of them in front of them, they realize there's a bigger movement afoot. And certainly we'd like to be at the forefront of that movement. So that was the follow on. Thank you, Carlin and Diane and Joseph.
Thank you so much for bringing this forward, and we'll look forward to following the progress of your good work. And seeing no more questions, we will now turn to in the order in which the warrant articles appear in the warrant, citizen petitions appear in the warrant. We'll go to Kate Kavanagh, ranked choice voting. Welcome, Kate.
Thank you so much, Diane, and the rest of League of Women Voters. I'm really grateful to be able to come and talk with you today about something that's near and dear to my heart. I'm Kate Kavanagh, and I've lived in Concord for 27 years, raised my kids here, as have most of you. And I love Concord for its values and its beauty and its heritage. And again, like many of you, in 2016, I became very aware of the fragility of democracy. With that said, created Concord Indivisible. Many of you know me better with a crown on. This article that I'm here for has to do with protecting democracy, because I fully believe, especially today, that unless we do everything we can to further democracy, we will lose it. So with that said, let me share with you about the warrant article I am proposing. I trust everybody can see this. It is Article 23. It's a citizen petition for ranked choice voting for Concord elections. I truly believe that because of Concord's being in the vanguard of democracy for so many years, that again, we want to lead the way now. Okay, and this is the wording of the legislation to see if the town will vote to authorize and request the select board to file home rule legislation, similar to what we were talking about before, to elect town offices, just town offices, by ranked choice voting. And the full legislation should be in the chat shortly. Now, not only am I in favor of this, but the League of Women Voters agrees and has for a while. And especially in 2020, League of Women Voters urged people to vote yes on ballot question 2. Undoubtedly, many of you are familiar with that initiative. 34 Concordians came out to get signatures for it then. And their explanation of ranked choice voting is, and I quote, a voting method in which voters rank candidates according to their preferences. The candidate that receives a majority of first preference votes is declared the winner. Currently, statewide elections in Massachusetts use a plurality voting system. League of Women Voters Mass did a study of voting systems, and the consensus was that voting systems should be easy to use, administer and understand, encourage high voter turnout and real discussion on issues, encourage candidates to run, and promote minority representation. The League also concluded that a voting system should require the winner to obtain a majority of the votes. So rather than talking about it, let me show you what it's about.
No sound is coming.
Sorry. Give me a minute there. I'll need to stop sharing and turn the sound down. Apologies.
Of a candidate who earned only a small percentage of the vote, even when the majority of voters supported other candidates. But that's not the only way of electing our leaders.
Could you start it over?
Another voting method,
Okay.
which allows voters So what is ranked choice voting? In most parts of the United States, voters select a single candidate for each position on their ballot, and the candidate with the most votes wins. This is known as single-choice winner-take-all, which can sometimes result in the election of a candidate who earned only a small percentage of the vote, even when the majority of voters supported other candidates. But that's not the only way of electing our leaders. Ranked choice voting is another voting method which allows voters to rank their candidates in order of preference. In a ranked choice voting election, a candidate needs to earn more than half of the votes to win. All first choices are counted, and if a candidate has a majority, then they win, just like any other election. If not, the candidate with the fewest votes is eliminated, and voters who picked that candidate as number one will have their votes count for their next choice. This process continues until a candidate earns a majority and is declared the winner. Let's look at an example. Here, you select orange as your first choice candidate, yellow as your second, pink as your third, and green as your final choice. The first choices are counted. Yellow earned 35%, orange 21%, pink earned 28%, and green earned 16% of the vote. Because nobody won more than 50%, the candidate with the fewest votes is eliminated, and voters who picked him as their first choice have their ballots count for their second choice. This continues until a candidate receives more than half of the votes, or 50% plus 1. So what are some of the benefits of ranked choice voting? Ranked choice voting provides more choices, allowing more than two candidates to compete without fear of splitting the vote among like-minded individuals. Sometimes voters feel pressured to vote for the lesser of two evils. Ranked choice voting allows people to vote for their favorite candidate, not just against the candidates they dislike. With ranked choice voting, we see more positive campaigns and less negative advertising. Candidates are encouraged to reach out to as many voters as possible, including those supporting their opponents. They can build a winning coalition with like-minded candidates to earn voters' second and third choices. It's time to fix our democracy and make our elections work better for everybody. We can do that with ranked choice voting. Visit www. So what is
And in case you think this is just a crazy liberal idea, newfangled, actually, RCV has been used around the world for years in Australia, New Zealand, Northern Ireland, Scotland, and in the United States. Alaska and Maine successfully passed RCV and have been using it. And many, many cities and towns across the states have been using it as well, with great success. In Massachusetts, Cambridge has been doing it since 1941. East Hampton had their first election with RCV last fall, very successfully. Awaiting state approval, we've got Amherst and Arlington, and we have a gentleman here who's the architect of the Arlington Initiative, who's going to be addressing your questions and answers. And it's under study in Brookline, Northampton, and Somerville. And in Acton, our neighbor, they are working on it as we are in Concord, Boston, Holyoke, Salem, a number of cities across the Commonwealth. And what about Concord? Well, you all remember the ballot question in 2020. And as I mentioned, 34 of you went out and got signatures. Thank you so very much. In that election, 63% of our residents voted and 61.4% voted yes. So clearly this is something that our town supports. In addition, in order to move to ranked choice voting, you need to have voting machinery that's compatible with ranked choice voting. And thank goodness we do. We have DS 200, which does allow us to make that shift. There are many municipalities that do not, and they have to have an additional cost to do this. Now, sometimes people will say, well, you know, ranked choice voting is too complex and too unfamiliar, but indeed, we are all very familiar with making decisions according to ranked choice voting. We use it when we go out to dinner with somebody else. We use it when families try to decide where to move to, where to go on vacation. If you're a sports fan, you might even be in fantasy leagues and create a draft board. I'm not, but I've heard it's very popular. So it's not complicated. It's not foreign. We get it just fine. And in terms of bipartisan, this has nothing to do with parties. The candidate with the majority wins, period. Doesn't matter who they are. So just to clarify what Article 23 would do, it would enact ranked choice voting for our town elected offices, select board, school committee, housing authority, moderator. But it would not change the structure of those offices, and it wouldn't affect how we handle state elections or the state ballots at all. We would not need a charter change. And we've got some recent updates from the town that ranked choice voting could be achieved without a change in the town charter. Therefore, the article language will be amended on the floor of the town meeting to eliminate the sentence that suggests the town charter needs to be changed, because it does not. So we're ready. The question is, why do it? We'll have more new voices in the process. Elections and many other things can tend to become an insider occupation, but this might bring more outsiders into the process, more positive campaigning, clearly, more energy. People are going to be revitalized by new candidates and new voices, and it'll be more representative of the people of our town. So the question for me becomes, why not? Because Concord has a tradition of trailblazing for democracy. We really need to continue that, and I'd like to do it again. So with that said, I'd like to turn this over to somebody we're very fortunate to have here today, Greg Dennis. He's the Policy Director of Voter Choice Mass. And again, as I mentioned, he has been the person in charge of the Arlington move for ranked choice voting. So he's in a really great position to speak to any kind of implementation issues or questions you might have. Greg?
Thank you, Kate, for all your help on this. I don't know if we can spotlight Greg, if the technical wizards in the background. Oh, there we are.
Well done. Thank
you. Greg, we're going to take some questions first, unless there's something you wish to add before we take questions.
No, I think we can just go right into the questions. I think that's fine.
Okay, terrific. The first question I see is from Janet Rothrock.
Okay, this is not a question, but and I hope I'm not stealing your thunder, but listening to this, it's not specifically an environmental issue, which I'd be most concerned about, but it promotes civil dialogue and campaigning, decreases demonization of opponents, promotes talk about issues instead of candidates. So I think it's more constructive and lays a better foundation for governing. And I think this could be especially useful for environmental issues, which are by their nature complicated and require thoughtful solutions. So instead of mudslinging, we might get more talk. You don't want to demonize your opponent because you might need their support of their voters. So go team.
Thank you, Janet, so very much. I don't see another hand at the present moment. Mind you, again, I just remind you, I cannot see everybody on the screen, so that if you do have a comment, if you do want to raise your hand, please use the reaction button at the bottom of your screen. Carlin, I see we have a question.
Right, this is actually for me. This process relies heavily on automatic machines to do the counting. What happens if a machine fails or there is a power outage? This stems from some of the questions that the town clerk's office raised during the public hearing on this article.
Well, I imagine the process would be the same if a machine failed or there was a power outage today in a precinct. If that were to happen and you were not able to use the scanner today, well, what would the process be? The process would presumably be the ballots are deposited in the bin, the hand count bin, and then probably tabulated later in town hall through their optical scanner. So I think the process would probably be the same as the process today in the case of a power outage.
Does that answer your question, Carlin?
Well, yes, and having been one of those people who does the hand counting, I can see it would dramatically increase the time it takes to reach the results from this process. But that's it. It does answer the question. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, if I could add one point to that. So the hand counting in the precinct, so if they are to be hand counted in the precinct, I was suggesting they would be tabulated, fed through the optical scanner back at town hall in that case. But if you want to hand count them in the precinct, largely what would happen in the precinct is you would hand count the first choices. And if any candidate had a majority of those, and then those first choices would be summed with the first choices townwide. And if any candidate has a majority of those first choices townwide, you would know that they win that election in the case of a single seat election. If no candidate has a majority of the choices townwide, then the full ballots would probably be scanned in a tabulator back at town hall where there is power to get the result.
Thank you. I see we have a question from Pamela Dritt and then Mark Galis. So Pamela?
Thank you. I just wondered if the results on first choices, second choices, third, and so on will be made public.
That's ultimately a determination of the town clerk. They are made public in virtually every jurisdiction around the country that has ranked choice voting.
Yay.
The full what's cast vote records of the ballots are typically put online as they are in Maine and elsewhere. And that allows anybody to download the ballot data and confirm the result for themselves. You can download some free software, use the ballot data, and run the tabulation yourself on your laptop and see the result.
Excellent.
So allows us to do that.
Transparency.
Yay, thank you. Mark Galis.
Yes, thank you. I think this is an excellent idea. I have one sort of technical question. Can you say anything about the different ways, sort of the algorithms or the ways that are set up for dealing with ballots that come in that are marked in sort of a funny way? So, I mean, the little video showed 1, 2, 3, 4 all filled in, but this is a little more complicated. So I assume if somebody just puts in a choice of first choice, that's not a problem. But what if somebody just puts in a second or a third, or could you just say a little bit or maybe point me towards some places where some of that is discussed, those mechanics? Thank you.
Sure. You're right, first of all, that a voter is free to rank as many or as few choices as they want. If they only have a first choice, they can just mark a first choice, and that's perfectly valid. Those other kinds of markings you might suggest if somebody only put in a second choice, or, put 2 choices for their first choice or something like that. The tabulators in the precinct can be configured to detect many of those cases and warn the user and give them an opportunity to revote as they can today. So today, if you were to vote for 2 candidates in a single seat race, you would be warned and typically be given an opportunity to revote. So the machines can be configured in the precinct to do that. Now, the voter always has the ability to say, no, you warned me, but I want you to accept my ballot as is. Doesn't matter how I marked it. That's the voter's freedom to submit any kind of ballot they want, regardless of how it's marked. And in cases like that, or perhaps in cases where the machine can't be configured to detect a particular kind of marking, the rules are set up to be sort of generous with interpreting the voter's intent. So if somebody marked a first choice, skipped the second choice by accident, and marked a third choice, the third choice in that case would be automatically considered as if it were their second choice and things like that. So so the rules are set up, and if you have other examples, I could talk about the specific way that those types of markings would be handled if the voter is able to evade the warning from the scanner in the precinct.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We're again running tight on time. So if David Allen, if you have a very quick question, it'd be fantastic.
Just a few seconds rather than a question to say, I think this is one of the most important steps we can take at a local level ourselves to preserve democracy. It provides for a multiplicity of views rather than an us versus them, bad guys, good guys approach. Let's do this. Thanks.
David, so much. Okay. Greg, thank you for joining us. And Kate, thank you for your very informative presentation. Again, just remind everybody, questions can be directed to Kate before the May 1st town meeting. Dean Banfield is with us now, and he's talking about, this is article number 35, planned residential development.
I think you're on
update.
you've highlighted the wrong person.
Yeah, highlighted the wrong person. I was thinking, wait, that's not the next one. It should be Karen Jordanus who is highlighted.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll fix it.
No problem.
That's all right. Article number 35, planned residential development update. I didn't think that was your warrant article, Dean.
Apologies. They gave me the list and I just was too on the ball and skipped one.
No worries.
Okay. Hi, Karen. Welcome.
Hi. Well, thank you very much for the invitation and the opportunity to present this to the League. We can move to the next slide. This is the presentation for the public meeting next week. And this article, I would say, is very specific and narrowly focused on an enhancement to our existing PRD bylaw. So very specifically, as the motion reads, is to determine whether the town will vote to amend the zoning bylaw section 10, planned residential development, to alter section 10.2.9 to increase the minimum amount of upland common open space from 50% to 75%. Next slide. I think you're all aware of the PRD bylaw, at some level. It's an alternative to a standard subdivision that allows the creation of what some people might say is a more progressive neighborhood. It allows for greater housing density by reducing the constraints that typically exist on lot size, setbacks, and things of that nature. But there's some conflict with that bylaw and other aspects of open space in town. So I think we're all aware, that the town does a great job of preserving open space. Conservation land and open space contribute significantly to Concord's unique character. And we have important bylaws that help us preserve natural resources and open space. There is a wetlands bylaw that protects water resources. So this includes streams, rivers, traditional wetlands, river frontage. And we also have the PRD bylaw, which preserves, and you could almost say like creates open space. So these are all very good things in town with respect to preserving open space. Next slide. So there is a bit of a conflict between the two laws that I just cited. So the PRD bylaw, it offers the opportunity to build higher density housing, but in exchange for the creation of open space. That open space, 50% of it can currently be wetlands. But as I noted with the wetlands bylaw, that land is already protected from development. You cannot do the development on wetlands. So including the protected wetlands into the calculation for the open space required in a PRD is effectively limiting the amount of open space that is preserved in a PRD. It kind of allows like double counting when you're calculating the amount of open space in a PRD. Next slide. So the solution that we're proposing is to reduce the amount of protected land that can be included in the open space calculation. So to remove it from 50% to 25%. We think that reducing the amount of protected land that can be used in that calculation is a more fair exchange for the increased housing density that a developer will have in a PRD design. And that this reduction of the amount of protected land in the calculation is really better aligned with the town's conservation values and land preservation values. And next slide. This is very specifically the update. You can see the wording pretty much stays the same, except where it's now saying that 75% of the common open space shall be upland, or another way of saying it, that the amount of wetlands can only be 25%. And that's it.
Thank you so much, Karen. That is very interesting. For someone who is trying to follow all of this, can you give us a sense for, in a kind of cutting to the chase? Therefore, if I were to build on a small plot of land that also has quite a bit of wet, zoned wetland. Wetlands. Would I therefore, by following this rule, have to put a smaller house on that space in order not to crowd the plot? Or would it allow me to put a bigger house on the space in order not to crowd the plot?
So this is something that would not apply to an individual building a home on a parcel. So this would apply very specifically to the creation of PRDs. So the PRDs are where there's a parcel of land, it's probably going to be a few acres, and you can develop a number of housing units, and they're typically spaced close together because, as I said, they don't have to adhere to the standard subdivision requirements of a specific lot size and setbacks, so the space between the homes. So we have a number of developments around town. Our Riverwalk is an example of a PRD. A lot of people are familiar with the Riverwalk community. So you typically have units that are closer together, and then somewhere else in the design of that PRD neighborhood is an area that is considered open space, for the residents of the community, and that's usually made available for use for people who live outside of that community. Currently, that open space that gets created, and it is created because the homes in that development are typically put closer together, that if you have wetlands in the overall property, currently you can say, I'm going to take 50% of, I'm going to take a portion of those wetlands, and it can be 50% of the open space that I am required to create in my PRD design. So you're basically saying land that I can't develop anyway, I can use that in the calculation of the land I will not be able to develop, which is considered the open space for the PRD. So you're kind of counting what you can't develop and putting it into the calculation of what you're not going to be able to develop in your design. So you're being able to double count. Whereas if someone had a parcel and they were developing a PRD and they had no open space in that large parcel of land, they would have to preserve 35% of that land for open space. And then if somebody has a parcel that's similar, let's say similar size, but some of it is wetlands, which cannot be developed, they can then say, well, I'm going to, I can't develop that. And that's great because I can put that into my calculation for my required open space. And that's just going to be easier for me to preserve open space. But effectively, you're not preserving as much as the real intent of the PRD bylaw.
Karen, that's fabulous. I wonder if it would help if you had a graphic design in
Okay.
the presentation that demonstrated what it looks like, because most of us are not realtor, real estate developers. An example of what happens when this is applied, so that people can visually see the very thoughtful presentation that you're offering us. This is really interesting. Are there other questions besides mine, rather dim one?
No, it's not dim. It's not dim.
Are there questions from others? I don't see any hands raised. Carlin, are there any questions in the chat box?
Yes, we have two so far. One is, what do the Planning Board and the Natural Resource Commission think of this proposal? And the second question is, wouldn't it be less complicated to simply exclude wetlands from the calculation of buildable area? So the two questions, what do the two boards think? The Planning Board, the Natural Resources Commission, and then wouldn't it be easier just to exclude the wetlands from the calculation?
So I did reach out to Elizabeth Hughes for feedback on the proposal, and her concern was that it could in some way discourage developers. I think they would be disappointed, but I think, quite frankly, I don't think it would discourage a developer from building in Concord. I haven't had a conversation specifically with the Natural Resources Commission, but I would hope that since it's the intent is really to preserve more open space, that they would be supportive of it. And I wouldn't disagree that a simpler thing would be to exclude all of the wetlands from the open space calculation. I think the thought with the group of people who wanted to put this forth is that we would have better luck reducing it from 50% to 25% rather than to 0.
So a pragmatic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Carlin, I see there are more questions in the chat box.
We have another one. Could you talk a bit about the continuity of the open space? For example, can a developer just make a 10-foot wide strip around the outside of the development and have it count?
So I think that answer is no. I wouldn't be able to speak to the details of the configuration of the open space, but the bylaw does include requirements about that open space. It can't be bits and pieces here and there. The intent is for it to be a consecutive usable piece of open space. Usable in the sense that you don't have to hop from one part of the development to the other to experience the open space.
Thank you. And Carlin, you have another.
This is one of my personal questions. What prompted you to offer this bylaw a change? I mean, something must have triggered the desire for this. What happened?
So, I think that people who have maybe been engaged with some of the more recent PRDs in town, there have been issues with the density around those PRDs that would suggest that they are inconsistent with the goals of a PRD, to allow for more dense housing and open space, more flexibility. And we're seeing the PRDs become kind of a distortion of a planned standard subdivision with very large individual units and spread out and basically developing as much space as possible. And, recognizing that this is a way that the amount of open space can be distorted. That was kind of a recognition with a group of people that, this is kind of a loophole that we should try to close a bit so that the PRDs really do have a reasonable amount of open space in exchange for that increased housing density.
Karen, thank you so much. I'm going to quickly summarize a comment that Stefan Bader has put in the chat box, which is it would also listing of recent or well-known PRDs would be helpful for voters in order to visualize the impact. So, beautifully done. Thank you so much for being here and for doing this.
Thank you.
Okay, I've been asked how much time has been scheduled for this meeting. We're meant to go until 11:30. I hope we won't run out of time, but I think the wizards behind all this could give us a little more if we need it. Now we go to Dean Banfield. Hello, Dean. The development of
Happy to go next, but are we skipping? Is 34 not going to be discussed? That's all.
No, it's not.
Okay,
And
that's fine.
I was going to mention that at the very end, Dean. 34 is not being discussed. We reached out and there was a determination not to do that. But I think it's an important warrant article, and I hope at some point there will be a forum that gives that particular item, probably under the planning board, an opportunity to discuss that. Dean is here, Banfield, for number 38, the development plan for a municipal solar generation. Thank you, Dean.
Thank you, Diane. So let's see here if I can share my screen, see if this works. We're trying here. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Can. That's fantastic. Let's see how happens if I go here. Okay. So this is the I have a disclaimer that I have to make that's very formal in public hearings at the floor of town meeting. I'm on the finance committee, but I'm just doing this for myself. I'm not with the finance committee. That's the short form of that. It's much longer if I have to do it formally. You can read the text here, or if you have your warrant, you can read it there. But there's really just two things I want to stress about why I'm bringing this. The main objective is to get the light plant back in the business of creating solar generation facilities on town-owned properties. We haven't done any since 2017. And the secondary intention is that we not just run in and start doing it again, but that we step back a little bit and we do it in a thoughtful, transparent manner. And we engage with all the questions that, we've been putting off, which is why we're not doing it. And then we establish a plan and we set out a schedule so we can reach our objective. So the question is, what is our objective? Our objective is to meet this goal that you see here in the climate action plan, which is to create 20 megawatts of solar generation facilities on town-owned properties by 2030. We're, as you can see on this slide, we're about 7.5 megawatts, so about a third of the way there. And we've got about 12.5 megawatts to build. I have to not answer a call. There we go. Of course, somebody has to call you right when you're giving a presentation. So where are we now? The question is, as you can see on this timeline, we've been at this 12 years ago, and we started with a target of 25 megawatts. We made a lot of progress until 2017 when W.R. Grace went live in January of that year. And then at town meeting that year, we passed Article 51, and that aligned our greenhouse gas reduction targets with those of the state with an intermediate goal of 2030, but really looking at 2050. But at the end of 2017, the light plant adopted a strategic plan that completely deprioritized solar development, and we haven't built any more since then. So the climate action plan, revived this goal, trimmed it back to 20 megawatts, but even at this reduced goal, we're going to need to create between 1.5 and 2 megawatts a year to achieve our objective. So right now, about 90% of the electricity we use is from non-emitting sources. So good for the light plant and the light board for focusing on this. And the light board expects to get to 100% non-emitting electricity in our homes by 2025. So the real question the article is asking is this: is local solar on our municipal properties still important? If we can get to 100% by 2025 without building any more, is it important? I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't think it was. Local renewable power generation on our municipal buildings is a direct indication of our values as a community, and it shows that we're willing to do what we can to reduce how we impose on others for the energy we use. So looking at the problem with a wider lens, the state has also recognized that its earlier greenhouse gas reduction framework, the one that Concord signed on to in 2017, was not aggressive enough, and the state has created fresh roadmaps through both regulatory and legislative actions. Broadly speaking, those actions target investor-owned utilities like National Grid and Eversource. Municipal light plants have a light touch, and they're generally exempted from being required to fall into line with those harsher standards. But I think Concord can and should be doing whatever we can. Why can I not go to the next slide? One second. Here. We're going to try that way. There we go. So adding more local solar will not come without effort. The highest priorities of a municipal light plant are to provide reliable electric service at a reasonable price. Ratepayers should be able to anticipate stable electric rates with only modest increases over time. Creating more solar will need to be done in the context of rate stability, and any possible upward pressure on rates will need to be balanced against alternatives. We also need to be thoughtful about the current infrastructure of CMLP. Its distribution system will need to manage the extreme variability of solar power generation, so I don't want to minimize the need to work through any technical barriers that may exist. But when I review the work that's been done elsewhere, I'm encouraged that these kinds of challenges can be overcome with careful technical planning and appropriate financial analysis. This is why this article specifies a planning period for the remainder of 2022 with a review by the Select Board and the Finance Committee. Touching briefly on the benefits of doing this, I've already mentioned the value of doing what we can to create the energy we consume, but there's an adjacent value at work here. And that is that the distributed nature of renewable power generation will help to reduce the historical disparities between the places where power is produced and where it's consumed. And as we electrify vehicles and buildings, our thirst for more electricity will keep growing, and that demand is going to put strain on the wider New England grid. Local solar helps to alleviate some of that stress, and that can translate into avoided costs. And once the financials are worked out, solar should slot in as a stable component of our electricity portfolio, and it won't be subject to any kind of price shocks for the 30 years or so that each array is expected to remain in service. We all have seen the consequences of our warming planet through the increasing frequency and destructiveness of extreme weather events. Ecosystem changes, previously understood to take hundreds or thousands of years, are being reduced to the length of a human lifetime. The Earth is not waiting until 2025 for Concord to open a new middle school. So we simply need to act with more urgency. By getting back in the game, the light plant can help the state with its 3% annual renewables target and can hopefully chip away at the highest cost component of its power portfolio. To give a sense of scale, I'll close with a short list. The system, currently designed to maximize the future CMS campus, will create about 1.1 megawatts, or under the minimum we need to create each year until 2030. We will need to look at all of our schools, buildings, and also find another utility scale site similar to the W.R. Grace installation. So let's all commit to getting started today. And I thank you for your consideration of Article 38. Unshare my screen.
Thank you, Dean. And if you stop sharing, that will be a help. And that's fantastic.
There we go. Whoop, it's dodging away from me. There we go.
Thank you so much. So we have a question from Tanya Gales.
Hi, Dean. I mentioned it at the public hearing also, and I know you're focusing on parking lots and, or, surfaces that do not contain trees or forests. Is there a way we can make this kind of part of the article or some kind of emphasis that
well, I think as I stated, Tanya, at the public hearing, I don't think it's anyone's first choice to cut down a tree. So we will obviously be looking for every opportunity we can before we start
know.
looking for places.
I know you did. I know you did, but the way
But
no,
I'm not going to draw a bright line either. I'm not going to say
question.
no tree will come down. A large area that can be, you know, if one tree gets in the way of the entire Beatty parking lot, maybe we take down a tree and we plant a tree somewhere else on the CCHS campus. I'm not going to rule out cutting down a tree here and there. I'm also open to the concept, and it's conceptual, that the amount of greenhouse gas reduction created by solar energy is greater than, you know, X tree that we might take down. Now, I know that it sequesters carbon, but it's a natural process, which is pretty minimal. And if we're offsetting a gas-fired power plant with this thing, the amount of greenhouse gas reduction may actually be greater to put a solar panel somewhere. So, you know, there's a lot of calculations you could do, but
I know.
it is the last choice to be cutting down trees, Danya. That's not the goal of
I
this
understand.
article.
Dean, I understand, but you did interrupt me. I wasn't finished. It wasn't a question about your preferences. This is a policy statement. You might not be there to defend trees or anything else when this policy continues. I just put in the chat a number of articles which emphasize current research about the importance of forests for climate change, and one of them even refers to how solar farms are one of the largest threats. I'm not against solar energy. I'm not against alternative energy. I just want some kind of stipulation in the article that about what you're saying, that forests will not be touched. You know, this is not about one tree here, one tree there. Yeah,
It's not part of the article, and it's not going to be moved in that way.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I see a couple comments in the chat box. One of them is Pamela Dritt is providing folks on this call with the information. I hope you'll turn to that. And then we have a question, don't we?
Sure.
Pamela Dritt first up here, Carlin, sorry.
That's fine. No, that's fine. That's great.
I am enthusiastically in favor of this. I also recognize that no solar installation should be put on forested land. Cutting down a tree here and there, that's fine. Not cutting down forested land to put solar. There's enough roofs that we need to do it there. Roofs and parking lots, yes. Forests, no. I know there was a community, Bromfield, I believe, where they locally had a solar installation where they did that. They clear cut a forest in order to put solar panels up, and it ruined the ecology of the town. So we can have both.
And a very good question was asked last night at the public hearing, FinCom public hearing, about the roofs that are being replaced or being asked to be replaced on Kai's Road. And it would be very nice if those roofs could, in fact, take solar panels. And in a certain urgency in terms of time, we're going to go forward. Carlin, is there another question?
But the battery is very important.
Yes.
Solar installations should include battery backup, which would allow residential houses with solar and battery backup to function as a local peaker plant, balancing out the power that we need and making it cheaper with just a little bit of infrastructure investment, especially including the use of electric school buses, which are, it's another one of those win-win-wins for children's health, for the cost of the system, and for the town, and for the environment.
Thank you, Pamela, so much. I know that many of the police cars, where it is appropriate to do so, are now being electrified. Carlin.
The last question I have is, I'm in favor of this article, Dean. I think it's well done. The Article 38, however, urges the light plant to act, but doesn't direct the light plant to act. Why urging and not directing? What's the difference and why?
I don't know that the town meeting has the right to tell the light plant what to do. So that's why it's urging it. The light plant, the structure of a municipal light plant is an enterprise. And I don't know whether the town meeting can tell an enterprise do X. I honestly don't know. So that's why the language says urge. So if it can, and maybe I should look between now and town meeting, I could change one word without changing the scope, I don't think, to say directs. But I don't think that the town meeting can tell the light plant, you must do X. I just don't think that it's within its power to do that.
Well, that's
It
what.
may.
that-
And if it
that
is,
is
maybe
great-
I can get a little
That is the great.
stronger language.
That's a great value of having these conversations in
Yeah.
well in advance of the town meeting, is be able to clarify something like that, Dean. That would be fantastic. Thank you so much for both an efficient and very thoughtful presentation.
Thanks, Diane.
Next we go to Article 46, which is the Reformatory Branch Trail Feasibility Study. And Phil Posner is going to be presenting his article number 46. Welcome, Phil.
Thank you. I'm going to try to manage this process, do my best. Okay. See if I can actually accomplish this. I may not be able to. First of all, I wanted to thank the League of Women Voters and Diane particularly for inviting me to speak this morning. Really appreciate it. My name is Philip Posner. I live at 223 Losbrook Road. Like Dean, I'm a member of a committee. I'm a member of the Transportation Advisory Committee, the TAC. But right now I'm speaking on my own behalf as a town resident, and my comments don't reflect any policy or decision or any deliberation of the TAC. Before getting started, I with the slideshow, I want to take a quick opportunity to talk about why I think this is a good idea, why I think it's in the public interest, why I think it's appropriate to spend money on. The petition asks that the town appropriate funds to study and document the current conditions of a man-made former railroad line constructed about 130 years ago. The funding would provide money to hold public forums and conduct a study with professional assistance. The warrant article itself doesn't make any prejudgment about what to do or what not to do. It's not a construction project. It's not a preconceived conclusion. You're going to hear from Mr. and Mrs. Galis in a minute. They proposed another warrant article. Mr. Galis suggested last night at the Finance Committee that if a multi-use path were to be created, the trail would have to be paved or should be paved, or that I want it to be paved. So I just want to say I don't support paving the trail. And should a plan eventually result in an improved multi-use plan, state policy doesn't require that asphalt paving be installed on the plan. I tried to place something in the chat with a link to a meeting that I attended a couple of years ago that Mrs. Galis referred to last night. Unfortunately, I can't do it, so I'll send it separately. I also was going to place in the chat a copy of the state policy from the Department of Transportation, which says very specifically that multi-use trails do not have to be paved. There are other considerations, especially considerations with respect to environmental and aesthetic issues. And many multi-use trails in the state are in fact not paved, but the funding for them from the state was still made available. So I'll try to make those documents available at your convenience. I also want to relate that for the last couple of years as a private citizen, not as a town board member, I've been talking with state officials, town officials, staff people from the Federal Fish and Wildlife Service about this issue. We've had good informal exchanges of ideas and concerns. Nothing's been decided. No policies were created. No commitments were made. There were no deliberations of any town committee. No work was proposed. My takeaway from the conversations were that the many objectives that folks have expressed concerns about or desires about with respect to the trail can be harmonized. It's not an either or situation. This isn't a, well, if we do this, we can't have that kind of situation. And that's something that I think is very important that if you folks give thought to the proposal. I want to say again that I like the aesthetic of the trail as it is today. So I'm going to move to this. Hopefully you can see it. This is a picture that I took in the spring of the trail. It's beautiful. I really like it. I'm not suggesting that we change how this feels when you walk down it or you ride a bike down it. But what I am concerned about, and what the idea of a set of public meetings and a study, is that the trail isn't welcoming to many people. In places it's unsafe, and after a rainstorm it's pretty impassable. So the idea of starting a process would be that the trail would provide a safe and comfortable access to Concord Center by foot, by bike, and other carbon-free mobility modes for the public. Improvement of the trail is in alignment with our carbon action goals. Improvements to grading and drainage and surface conditions may be accomplished without asphalt or other paving, as I mentioned. And I want to stress again that wildlife habitat must and will be protected. This idea doesn't come out of the blue. You can't see these studies, but when you take a look at the original slides, the one on the left is the Envision Concord study, the Envision Concord 2030 study. And this particular section, section 4.5, which has to do with mobility, talks about the public's interest in creating trails for walking and for biking. The document in the middle is the sustainability, the Cooler Concord document, which was created a couple of years ago. Same thing, looking for alternatives to carbon fired, or excuse me, gasoline powered automobiles and trucks as means of getting around. And the document on the right is a letter from DPW Director Alan Cathcart, in which he recognizes that the Reformatory Branch Trail is a trail of regional significance. It doesn't exist in an island. It's connected with the town of Bedford, and it connects the town of Concord with both Bedford, Arlington, and Cambridge. So what's the big deal? Why do we need to do something about this? I'm going to show you some pictures in a minute about what the trail is actually like, not what it is in our imaginations and in that various photograph or the photograph earlier. Today, after a rainstorm, it's muddy, it's poorly stabilized. You have erosion. There's a lot of poor drainage. There's a lot of big puddles. There are hatches and trees in the middle of the trail bed. Right next to Treatment Plant Road, there's a grade change of about 4 feet, which really makes it inaccessible for someone in a wheelchair. It's just not safe. This is what I mean. That's the picture of Treatment Plant Road. You can't quite see it, but that's a pretty steep drop off right there. This is a picture of what I mean when I say there's a tree in the middle of the trail. There's a tree in the middle of the trail. It's muddy. It gets slippery. You can't roll a wheelchair on this. If you have a mobility device that is not a wheelchair, but not a bicycle, this is pretty impassable many times of the year. This is a manhole cover in the middle of the trail. It's covered by leaves. And the reason why there's a manhole cover in the middle of the trail is that there's a public sewer line running underneath the trail. That's the sewer main that runs right down to the treatment plant. It's been suggested in the discussion that this trail is natural. And I want to suggest to you that the walking path of the trail, which is a former railroad right-of-way, is anything but natural. It was a railroad line that was constructed in the late 19th century. And at the time, no provision at all was made to protect wildlife habitat. It's not what people did 130 years ago. But given the concerns of the federal government and the requirements of state and local law, remediation of the present conditions, which today provide no protection for wildlife, none, no mitigation for wildlife transit from one side of the trail to the other, seems to be an important element of the planning and any eventual work. So my idea of creating a funded planning process would be so that qualified professionals, not just engineers, but also planners and biologists and other professionals, would be part of a public process from the very beginning. I think we all know that the federal government just authorized the expenditure of almost $1 trillion for infrastructure development. There are billions of dollars which have specifically been allocated to create safe and welcoming active transportation infrastructure. Through various planning studies and surveys, Concord residents have repeatedly said that they want safe walking and biking in the town. As I mentioned, active transportation is a buzzword that suggests that walking and biking is an important element in addressing transportation challenges, including greenhouse gas emissions at the local level, improving public health outcomes, and encouraging economic vitality, as well as a strong and welcoming community. Approving the article would be a step in promoting active transportation right here in Concord. It's a step. It's not a conclusion. And I'm hopeful that the League of Women Voters will consider both these materials and what I'm going to send along in a separate email as you think about it. And thank you very much for the opportunity to present today.
Thank you, Phil, so much. This continues to be a vibrant discourse in our town for so many reasons. Can we hear any, can we see if there are any questions in the chat box? I want to quickly say I have been informed by the wizards behind the screens that we can go until noon. I know that's inconvenient for people who have 11:30 deadlines, but I want to make certain that we have opportunity to discuss these questions thoroughly, and it will be online if you have to leave earlier on Monday Member News and on the League website under First Friday's videos. So we'll start. Janet Rothrock.
Yes, thank you. I don't have strong feelings one way or another about this. I want to start with that, but I hope that both parties offering articles on this subject think about the condition of the Heritage Trail, which runs through the Minuteman National Park, whether however the Reformatory Branch Trail is ultimately treated, it will require maintenance, which nobody loves maintenance. It's so unsexy. Everybody wants to start a project and nobody wants to take care of it, but you have to take care of things. But the Minuteman Trail, I've walked many, many times, and it's has persistent erosion issues, washouts. Big storm came through a while ago, a derecho, I think, and knocked down an incredible number of trees. So I hope that whatever the ultimate disposition of this trail is that somebody please take charge of maintenance. Thank you. Bye.
I would just say, Phil, I've not said this before, but in front of our home here on Sudbury Road, there was the decision on the south side not to put concrete down, but to put the permeable substance. It is so dangerous. In the spring, it floods. In the winter, that flooding then becomes ice. It is often by the town, not even, plowed. The sidewalks are not plowed, as in the recent snowstorm. So some of those kind of composite solutions are not as perfect sometimes as they sound. So I'll be curious to see, kind of what they decide or what they would think would be a good response that does not leave us as handicapped as the one in front of our house does. Ellen Quackenbush.
Thanks. Oh, just to comment on what Janet just said, the Trails Committee and the Department of Natural Resources maintains the trail. So there is, and we all know maintenance is hard, but that is taken care of. I'm concerned about this article because I think it has got some basic flaws. First, it's biased. It calls for an engineering feasibility study focused on grading and drainage. And also, Phil in several presentations talks about the problem of a tree in the middle of the path. I guess implying that he wants those trees cut down. I really don't think that's the right first step. I think we need to step back and do a needs assessment, not automatically use the word draining and grading and drainage in a town meeting article. I think that that's the wrong approach. Second, I think any change in reformatory branch must consider what's going to happen to Great Meadows. Great Meadows is a fragile ecosystem along with Morris Swamp. Increasing the traffic and speed along reformatory branch has consistently been opposed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife and by Concord town citizens. In 1995, a Viking study opposed the paving, you could say any solid surface on reformatory branch due to concerns by the Fish and Wildlife Service on bike traffic into Great Meadows. And just now, a couple of weeks ago, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service announced a gate that's going to be installed at Concord to limit the car traffic into Great Meadows to 21. That's the number of parking spaces. There's no ability to monitor bike traffic. And I think that we should take that into consideration and really ask Fish and Wildlife what their opinion is. Dr. Brian Windmiller of Zoo in New England has spent the last 20 years reviving the population of the Blandings turtle, an endangered species. He's increased it from 135 to 300. He's worked with Concord citizens, students, grade school and high school students. He is extremely concerned about any increase in traffic and speed along the trail, thinking that this will really destroy his progress. Solutions, mitigations are going to be extremely expensive. Elevate the trail, who's going to pay for it? I just think that we need to step back and think, what are the other ways to achieve an active transportation corridor? And something that's not mentioned, and Phil Posner is such an expert on complete streets, is using Bedford Road or Route 62. They're already paved. And, I think that we should have a more inclusive discussion, not just focused on how to change reformatory branch, but what is the best way to encourage bike transportation and not car transportation? And I think that's a wider discussion than rather, what are we going to do to change reformatory branch? Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. Tanya?
Hi, Phil, and many congratulations on the birth of your grandson. That's really wonderful news, and wishing all the best.
Yes.
Happened last night for those.
I know, it's amazing.
Yes.
It's amazing. Those things are really amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the most important thing. Thank you for saying that, Tanya. I appreciate
Sure.
it very much.
Absolutely, of course. And I know you want the best for him. I know you want a world where there is a lot of good bicycling, and I support that. Mark and I used to bicycle to Concord from Somerville when in our 20s, and I know it's not very safe now, and that's sort of why I stopped after my children were born, because I wanted to be safe for them. So I like bicycling and I support bicycling. What I will ask of the people here is to listen to the FinCom discussion last night, because a lot more was discussed, a lot more was brought up. Mark and I, by the way, are not saying that it is going to be necessarily paved. That came up because that was how this whole discussion started back in October 2020, when the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail people were promoting the idea of connecting the Minuteman Bikeway. And I think that it would be really best to be more open, more transparent about the main purpose of the focus on the RBT being the Minuteman Bikeway connection. And also to mention here, I'll mention that Bedford is still not done finalizing their plans. They are still asking for $1.5 million of their CPC. They still have land, eminent domain issues, easement issues, all to be discussed during their town meeting this year. So we are not saying that you necessarily want it paved. We just know that that's if the goal is to connect the Minuteman Bikeway and to help Bedford pave all the way into Concord, which they have not gotten funding for, it's going to be a wide bikeway. That is going to destroy the trees. And we don't want the trees destroyed. We don't want the paths destroyed. Mark's article, by the way, is not only about your article. We were going to put that on, something like that on anyway, but we were just waiting till the warrant opened. This is a long-term, Mark's article is a long-term article. It's whether yours passes or not, we still want the trail to stay natural. So I just want to bring that. And Larry, that's it. I'm sorry. Anyway, I just want to apologize that I'm going to put that YouTube link in the chat. I am as sick of it as everybody else is hearing about it. But I will put it there because I think it's an important document that shows what the intent of this entire proposal is. I do it with apology, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Bill Robichaud.
Yes, my name is Bill Robichaud, 25 Nancy Road. I've been the trail steward of the Reformatory Branch for about 12 to 15 years now. I've probably done more work on that than anybody else. I know what's going on with it. I follow what's going on in Bedford, and I think we need to get a little reality here. One of the things is we're talking about Bedford has been working on their trail since 2004, the same year they started the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. They did their feasibility study that long ago. The life cycle of a rail trail takes about that long. You could see where the Bruce Freeman Trail is right now. They did their feasibility study in 2005. They've had multiple town meetings where they've allocated a lot of money and a lot of investment in this. Their design is 100% done. What they're asking for at their town meeting is the final housekeeping, if you will, to get the trail finished. And there's a lot of enthusiasm. If we think that they're not going to do it, I think we're fooling ourselves. And I think when it comes to town meeting, we will know for sure if they've got the final piece accounted for. So I think we need to go with that assumption, and that trail is going to come to the Concord line. The last few hundred yards will not get paved because of policy issues around Mass DOT saying that they won't pave something that's going to an unpaved trail. So about the last 800 feet will not be paved, but it will be more or less completed. That's the first thing. The second thing is there's a lot of talk about changing Route 62 to be safer for bicycles. I live right off of Route 62. I've been there for 40 years. There's no way it's safe at this point for bicyclists. You may get some of the more experienced bicyclists, but for someone my age, for kids going to school, that is not a safe road to ride on. There is no feasibility study having been done to change that road. There's no funding to do a feasibility study. And frankly, I don't think any of us could conceive of how Bedford Street can be made safe with bicycle trails on it. What I wanted, I think I want to emphasize is this is a feasibility study. It's really not an engineering plan of any sort, the Article 46. It's looking at, let's get all the issues out there, let's identify them, and let's see what we can do to mitigate that trail. I have a lot of ideas about it, having been working on it for so many years. Most of the issues raised by people in the meetings can be resolved. I'm convinced of that. But we need to start studying it. And it will take many years before we get beyond that. Thank you for your time. I want to ask you to take a look and endorse this, not as a plan to change anything, but as a plan to study it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill, so much. And I can see that there are several connections in our chat box that to which people can turn if they want more information. Carlin, is there a question in the chat box?
Yes, there is. It's a question regarding safer walking. For those of us with mobility limitations to our walking, the footing on the Reformatory Branch Trail is far too unstable to be safe. Is safer walking part of your study?
I think would have to be, of course. You know, my sense of how this would work is that assuming that the town meeting is in agreement, the town manager would delegate the authority to create a request for proposals, presumably to either the planning department or the Department of Public Works. Those officials would put out an RFP requesting professional services to examine all of the issues to make this trail accessible, which I think most of you know has a fairly specific meaning that it's accessible for people who have mobility challenges or are disabled. I'm personally very sensitive to that issue. And I think if there was any question about that being a part of the public conversation, I would raise it myself and request that the town be clear that it needs to be part of the conversation.
Thank you so much, Phil. Janet, Janet, you're always efficient, but we have to be quick. So
yeah, I'm sorry. Second comment on same article, but I would ask to collect as much information as possible before a decision is made. One of the bits of information, and there are many studies on this, is that the more you separate bicyclists from cars, the more adoption of bicycling you will get. So especially among older people and kids. So I don't know to what extent people use that trail for commuting or riding or whatever, or to what extent they might if it were, it didn't have potholes or whatever. But I think this is something that should be considered. There are a lot of studies on separating them, bike lanes or whatever. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. And Terry Ackerman asks a very important question. Phil, are you open to changing from an engineering study to a general needs assessment? And that's something. Yeah.
I think that, I think, first of all, it didn't say that it was an engineering study, and maybe that's sort of implied by the words that I used about drainage and grading. Mm-hmm. And I think a needs assessment is also probably a technical term. But the larger point that I had hoped to accomplish was to undertake a public conversation so that there would be an opportunity for the public to weigh in on this with the participation of professional help. So if that's what a needs assessment is, then yes, a needs assessment is appropriate.
Thank you. And thank you, Terry, for that good question. Phil, thank you. Give your new grandson a hug for us when you're
Oh,
able.
thank you so much. I'm looking forward to meeting him.
Now, Article 47, preserve Concord's Reformatory Branch Trail. And this is a presentation from Mark Galis. Welcome, Mark.
Tanya, can you turn your phone? Your,
I will.
hello.
Okay, okay. Go ahead.
Okay, there we go. I had a little echo over here. Okay, so I guess I will share screen. Why is it not letting? Okay, that looks better. Want that?
We can't hear you. Is your
Just
microphone on?
Hold on. Am I muted?
No, I mean your. You
Sorry,
need to turn on your thing.
technical difficulty here. Hold on.
Microphone.
Can people hear me?
You can.
No, you can't hear them. Is your volume on?
Okay. All right. Let me know if you can't hear me. Okay, I'm screen sharing. I'm going to bring up a PowerPoint. I'm going to try to put it in a full screen mode from beginning. Okay. Are you seeing images of people on the side or not?
No, we're not. Just the
Okay.
trail.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay. Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for this opportunity to discuss Article 47. The aim of Article 47 is to help us preserve this special and valuable natural trail in town. The wording of the article is in two parts. The first part is to determine whether the town will recommend to the owners of the various portions of the Reformatory Branch Trail in Concord and to the individuals and entities and all other parties responsible for the care thereof, that the trail continue to be maintained in an unpaved natural condition for walking, hiking, jogging, dog walking, nature immersion, nature observation, photography, and cycling. The second part of the article offers some simple guidelines, and that any future changes made to drainage, to features affecting individuals with reduced mobility, or to other aspects of the trail be done in a way that causes the least injury possible to existing trees, does not clear cut trees to make the trail wider, and preserves to the greatest extent possible the existing natural characteristics of the trail, or take any other action relative thereto. Why protect this trail? Concord's Reformatory Branch Trail is a gem of natural beauty and endangered species habitat. New research shows that mature trees, mature edge forest trees, like those along the sides of this trail, can be significantly better at capturing carbon than trees in the middle of a forest. They are not expendable. Sorry. This town asset is currently enjoyed by a wide range of users, including walkers, joggers, dog walkers, bird watchers from all over the world, and cyclists of all levels and ages. In the light of recent threats to the survival of this exemplar of a mixed-use natural trail, this article reaffirms the town's commitment to protect and preserve it. Who is taking care of the trail right now? This Reformatory Branch Trail is maintained by the Concord Trails Committee and its trail stewards, with assistance from the Division of Natural Resources and the Department of Public Works. A trail guide and map are found on the town's Division of Natural Resources webpage. The town of Concord has considered the use of this particular trail before. Concord's 1995 Bikeways Task Force report stated the goal should be the reservation of this trail for passive pedestrian use for reasons that are still true. impact on endangered species habitat, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service concerns for capacity at Great Meadows. The trail today is multi-use and preferred in its current form by pedestrians, joggers, dog walkers, hikers, and many cyclists of all levels of experience. However, it may be under threat. Concord's Reformatory Branch Trail has been discussed outside of Concord by special interests who want to make it an extension of the Minuteman Bikeway. These discussions do not prioritize protection of wildlife or preservation of the natural characteristics of the trail that provide us with nature immersion, healthful nature immersion, and nature education benefits. The Metropolitan Area Planning Council, on its trail map of regional trails, labels Concord's Reformatory Branch Trail with the inaccurate, unimproved paths image on the left, instead of the more accurate natural surface footway on the right. The November 4th, 2020 meeting of the Bedford Bicycle Advisory Committee included a collaborative discussion with Concord participants on strategies to extend the Minuteman Bikeway into Concord Center. We will get support in Bedford if we can promise that it will go into Concord. Here on this map, I've put in a broad red line to indicate the general location of this trail. Due to human and nature's action over the years, the present path of the trail varies in interesting ways from a straight line, and it passes through different types of natural areas and also farmland. It is important to note that almost 1 mile of the trail is directly adjacent to U.S. Fish and Wildlife's Great Meadows National Wildlife Refuge, whose large water impoundment is shown in the darker green at the top, just below the meandering Concord River. Very importantly, as you can see from this image, the trail is embedded directly in an area of rare species habitat, all of the area in hatched light green. These local rare species are in our care. They are our responsibility. Some further information about the trail and how we can help protect it will be posted on the website savetherbt.com, which is undergoing some updating. Please continue to check it for news. This trail, in its present state, teaches us about nature's powers of recovery and renewal. To me, this is an important lesson. Please lend your support to Article 47. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark, so much. And I believe you're running your own screen. Yes, thank you. Perfect. Thank you. What questions do people have? Are there questions? I know there's a question in the chat box or two. But Janet?
I find it curious that people see these two articles as so opposed to each other. I feel that it would be quite possible to, well, they don't seem mutually exclusive. So I'm curious about that. And I expect a lot of other people at town meeting might be curious. I don't see why they are so opposed to each other. Thank you.
Mark, do you want to respond before we go to the next question or comment?
Well, so
you don't have to, but I mean, if you want to.
Well, I'll just say, because I thought maybe some people might ask this, the degree of opposition between the articles depends on where Mr. Posner's article takes us. And I don't think it's at all clear that it's not going to take us down a path of destruction for the natural trail. It's not clear. The article seems to have Article 46, since I'm being asked about it directly, seems to have a peculiar combination of a feasibility study combined with outreach to find out, is there anything that needs a feasibility study and what extent it is? So it seems very confusing. As Tanya mentioned earlier, Article 47 is not meant to be in direct opposition to anything else. It's saying we have an extremely valuable, precious asset in town with a lot of local responsibility for rare species. We have a neighbor in the Great Meadows that a lot of people come to Concord for. It's one of the reasons people come to Concord. Besides all the other abutters, the Minuteman National Park has a bit of a budding area on it. The trail crosses Monument Road and Lowell Road, shuttling lots of traffic to those roads is going to cause additional issues. So this is quite a big deal, and keeping it natural has its own benefits, and it also precludes what might become an extremely expensive and kind of a really big change for the town. Urbanization.
Thank you. I'm mindful of the time. We have 5 minutes left, and I will cut us off at that time. So let's go to Ellen next. Quackenbush.
Thanks. I just wanted to say, to reiterate that the users, there's been some questions about the users of the trail. And just to reiterate that Great Meadows is a user, is an abutter, is an important stakeholder, and that to do nothing is perhaps the best thing for Great Meadows. It's certainly what U.S. Fish and Wildlife thinks. So I think that we should consider really strongly about the impact on our environment, which is one important part of climate change.
Thank you. Bill, before you speak, because we got to hear you a lot on the last one, let me just quickly see if there are questions in the chat box that take us to different voices, Carlin.
This is one. Is there data, or are there data on the preferences of both current trail users and those who might like to use but are unable to do so due to the state of the trail? Any data on that?
Carlin, I'll respond that I have reviewed every available planning study in the town records, and there is no survey or data on that specific issue that I've found. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but I haven't been able to find it.
Mark, do you have a different response or the same response to that question? You're muted, Mark, so if you're speaking, we can't hear you.
Okay, sorry. Was that question directed to Mr. Posner, or was that question directed to me?
But you were muted and we didn't know if you wanted to.
So what is the question? What is the question again?
Briefly,
are there data
to demonstrate its use.
That was garbled. I'm sorry.
Is there data about use by other people who might not be able to use it now? Is anyone who would like to use it now but can't use it now, have they said anything?
Thank you, Dominic.
Okay, thank you. Well, I've spoken to many people who use it and love it. And Tanya and I are very sensitive to mobility issues and think that in a sort of careful, incremental, organic way, there are things that could be improved without wholesale destruction and conversion of it into a bikeway. I am not aware of the Disabilities Commission reaching out to the Trails Committee, Natural Resources, Department of Public Works, or any other organized group. And I haven't seen this be placed as a high priority for the disability community in town, but that would certainly be appropriate if they independently wanted to come forward.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry to have to cut this off, but we have come to, in many ways, the witching hour. You can see in the chat box that there's a great deal of conversation going on from folks. And I know that this is going to be an ongoing discussion in our town. because for many of us, this is a precious trail, one I love walking, and I'm sure other people do as well. And Bill, I don't mean to not get to you, but we got to hear you on the last one, and we are now literally out of time. Our clock is running. Do you have a 1 second comment, Bill?
Yes, I will be hosting a number of walks on the trail in the next few weeks, and I'd like to invite everybody to join me on the walks, and let's look at the trail in its entirety and see where the issues are and what ideas we could have to go.
Bill, that's brilliant. Would you be willing to send those to me? And then I'll make sure they get up on our website or up on MMN so people can figure out what time it's going to be or where it might start. That would be fantastic. Thank you so much.
And we're working with Trails Committee and the Transportation Committee to get this going. So
thank you. That's an invaluable offer. Thank you so much. I want to thank everybody who participated. We've had fabulous discussions, detailed discussions on each of these citizen petitions. And I'm so grateful, most importantly, for citizens being willing to take initiatives and make our democracy a vibrant and vital one, because it is at risk right now. It is amazing to watch people in the Ukraine dying in order to have a democracy, while at the same time watching in some states an effort to try to preclude a vibrant democracy. With that comment, I wish you all a very good morning and thank you for joining us.